Okay, now let's try to understand different ways of pointers. We're going to understand what is a pointer to pointer, function pointers, and void pointers as well, right? I would say this is a lot of detail. If you feel like that you don't want to go into too much depth, you can just understand this one and then skip the rest of the part of the video. Um, but personal suggestion is if you can stay around until the end of the video, I'll just give you guys a very good explanation for function pointers and void pointers as well. Right. So let's start by understanding what is a pointer to pointer. It is basically a pointer that stores the address of another pointer. Right. I think this is very easy to understand. So just like a normal pointer stores the address of a value, right? A pointer to a pointer basically stores the address of another pointer, right? And now the question might be, why do we do this, right? Or what's the point of actually doing it this way? So the thing is, when we create 2D or 3D arrays, that's where double pointers come in play, right? If you're taking a university course or something like that, or even if you make projects in C, right, you would understand that we need double pointers to create arrays which are 3D or maybe 2D, right? Because those arrays would require dereferencing and referencing using double pointers, right? But in simple words, let's try to understand that in order to create 3D arrays using dynamic allocated memory, we need to use double pointers, right? Let's try to understand the code example of what's happening. So first thing is, I declare a int a equal 10. So let's say this is what happens, right? I declare this int a. In memory, some 10 gets created, and let's say it's set to value 10. Second thing I do is I create a star pointer, a normal pointer, and set it to the address of a. So what's going to happen is, right, this pointer p is gonna get created. So let's say this stores the address 006,000, right? And let's say this has the address 000x7000. Right? Let's try to understand what's happening, right? This is just a general example. I'm not sure if this is exactly how it works, but it's just to explain this concept over here, right? So value gets created 10, right? It is stored at the address 0x6000, and then that address would be stored in some other address place inside the memory, or I should say where it's stored 0x6000, right? So now when I create this int star star c equal address of p, right, this would create another block, right? And that block c would actually be 0x7000. So c would actually point to this address over here, and this actually points to this address over here, right? So how do we access the values? So I've given this printf statement, right? When I printf %d a, it's just going to print 10. It will just print 10. When I print %d star p, what means is take this address and go to this address. So it's going to take this address, go to it, and then whatever value is stored over there, it's going to print it. So star p will again print the value 10, right? Now when I do star star, I should say c over here, what this is going to do is, first this part means go to the address of p. So in this case, it's going to go to 0x7000. It's going to take the value of whatever it is at the address, and this second star will take us to whatever value is stored at 0x6000. So if this c is 0x7000, right, star c would actually be 0x6000, and then star c would actually be the value 10, right? So it's basically a double pointer. It points to a value, and hence again this one would also print the value 10, right? So I hope you were able to understand it. Don't worry too much about it. I will make sure that I don't introduce too much of double pointers. We would definitely not require it. But if you're somebody who's making projects in C using dynamic memory or malloc or calloc, you would definitely need to understand double pointers in too much detail, right? Okay. Let's try to understand what are function pointers, right? Function pointers can store the addresses of functions. This is again another use case, right? They are basically, we might need function pointers for dynamic calls. This is once again when you go in depth into C coding and make projects, that's where you would need function pointers and void pointers as well, right? If you don't want to go into too much depth, that's totally fine. you can end the video now and you can skip this part. But now let's try to understand what they actually do, right? Okay, so I've given void greet over here. I've given this function which basically prints the hello world, and then I've given the main function over here, right? So I'll not go into too much detail. Let's try to understand how do we declare a function pointer. This is how we basically declare it, right? So I create a void. Since this function is a void, right, I declare the pointer like void star fp equal greet. What this is going to do is this pointer will get created and it will store the address to this function over here, right? And how do we call it? We just call it simply in this way, right? If this doesn't make sense, I can also show it this way. So this would actually call this function, meaning greet would be called and it will print the hello world. But what this will do is, this is actually how we store the address to a function, right? Remember that this is different than how we declare normal pointers. Function pointers are declared in such a way. So what you need to make sure is, need to understand correctly how the use of brackets is happening. You see there's a void, and then there's two brackets where we have star fp, and then there's another two brackets, right? So we need to make sure that we don't miss these brackets and make sure that we follow the correct code syntax, right? Okay, so once again, in quick summary, this is how we declare a function pointer, and this is how we actually call the function pointer. Another way I can do is, I can actually do it just fp as well. This is the short way in doing this the same way, right? Now let's try to understand what are void pointers. Void star pointers can point to any type but must be cast to the correct type before dereferencing, right? So I told you in the very beginning, right, of the pointers, that we can declare pointers as int star p, char star p, whatever variable we are referring to, we can create a pointer for it, right? But let's say we need to create a general pointer, right? And in that case, we use the void pointers. Void pointer basically means that we can use it to point to anything, right? But the problem is that whenever we need to actually get the value at the address, right, we need to dereference it using the correct cast type. So let's try to understand what this means, right? I explained to you guys that we need to understand what the data type memory needs. Different data types need different memory, right? So an integer needs 4 bytes, characters need 1 byte, and different some other data types might need 10 bytes or 16 bytes, etc. In this case, what's going to happen is this A gets created, right? And what we can do is, we just created a general pointer. We need to make sure that whenever we dereference it, we are getting the correct amount of memory, whatever we need, right? And so think about this, right? If I just get the void pointer, the computer wouldn't know how much memory it needs to return, right? Should it return 10 bytes, 4 bytes, just 1 byte? And that's why we need to dereference it the right way before we actually get the value, right? So let's try to understand this code example. First, I declare int a equal 10. Then I do void star fp. So this is like general pointer to address of a, right? We haven't written int star p over here, just void p. But remember, when we are trying to print the value, this is how we actually get the value, right? I need to cast it. I need to tell the computer that it is actually an integer pointer, and then I'm dereferencing it. So let's try to understand what this actually means, right? So this I'm writing down to show that this is an integer pointer, right? I'm setting it to the correct data type. This is just like star p. This basically means dereference it and get the value over there. So in very short, int star means, okay, this is a pointer to an integer. This star means that, okay, dereference it and get me the value which is stored at that point, right? So quick summary before we end the video. Pointer to pointer is basically to store a pointer to another pointer, right? Again, this is important for creating 3D arrays. Function pointers can store the addresses of functions. So this is the exact syntax of how we do it. This is how we declare a function pointer, and this is how we can actually call it. These are the two ways. Third is void pointers. Void pointers are again a generic type. So we can declare and point it to anything we want, any data type we want, but we need to make sure that when we want to get the value at the pointer or at the address, we cast it to the correct type. And this is the correct way to cast it. Right, so I hope you were able to understand how pointers work. Now I'm just going to talk about a few bugs that students basically deal with in the rest of the video.